Hey there, readers, writers, and friends. Story Serpent here, and today we are talking about Misfits, a Copycat Conundrum, written by Lisa Yee and illustrated by channel favorite Dan Santat. It was published by Random House Children's, which is, of course, an imprint of Penguin Random House, in January 2025, so it's a very recent release. It is a middle grade, highly illustrated mystery, and it is the sequel to Misfits, a Royal Conundrum. But before we get into that, today's random words are like, share, subscribe, scampered. So, as you can see with this copy, I went with the library after the first one being mostly meh. I was pretty sure I don't need to own these. Very nice though, on this hardcover on the spine, we have once again the number in the series. Thank you very much, publishers. And then we have the title here down the spine. I do like this cute little detail of Olive peeking out over the top. That's super fun. So let's talk about this cover. Unfortunately, this cover doesn't have a lot to do with the actual book plot itself. The vase is present in the museum, but it doesn't factor significantly. This cat has nothing to do with the plot itself. It's in there for 2 seconds and is a reference to the previous book and then moves on. I've also noticed, and I think this is a time thing, because the release date for this book was set and public when book one released, which tells me the publisher had them on a very tight schedule for this book. And as a result, I don't think Dan had the whole book itself to do his illustrations from, and I don't think he had as much time as he may have wanted, because Olive and Iggy really start looking the same in a lot of ways. They're not nearly as distinct from each other in the illustrations as they were last book round. But what does the book say about itself? Dastardly criminals, preposterous odds, piece of cake for this ragtag group of nerds, dance fighters, and master nose pickers. Oof. After solving the case of the Royal Rumpus, Olive Coben Zhang and her elite team of underdogs are on top of the world. As the awkward, crime-fighting misfits, they're acing every mission thrown at them from NOC, aka No One Can Know, the covert agency they work for. But when their classmate Zeke starts receiving threatening notes, the misfits are stumped. They're no strangers to danger, but this case is a total head-scratcher. Who would target kind, friendly Zeke? Unless he's not what he seems to be. At the same time, unusual earthquakes start shaking up San Francisco just as priceless art goes missing, and the misfits are called to investigate. Is it a coincidence that the city is under attack while Zeke is getting mysterious messages? Or is it all just a cover for a scheme bigger than any they've faced before? Okay, so we are promised earthquakes are going to have something to do with this. We are promise that it's going to involve priceless art that's going missing, and Zeke, another student from the school, is going to be involved in this whole thing. The earthquakes stop being a thing a third of the way through the book. So let's start talking about what's working and what's not in terms of the story. The story's pacing feels super duper rushed. It feels like there were too many elements thrown into this story altogether for any of them really to end up with a satisfying ending. Yes, they all get tied together in the end. Yes, we understand the way all of the bits and pieces fit into the story. But they feel very contrived. They feel very inauthentic, inorganic. It's almost like Lisa had a random idea generator and generated too many ideas and had to work them all in. There's also a lot of other adult characters in this book. We have our 5 misfits, plus Zeke, plus their trainers from last time, Modest and his wife, whose name I can't remember. That's the other thing. I keep forgetting these characters' names. They are so unimportant. They don't imprint on me as being interesting and engaging. I don't care. So aside from those characters that all exist at the school, you also end up with artists outside museum operators and managers and the guy who runs the museum gift shop and these other people who are supposed to be very, very wealthy people who are looking for an adventure and get involved with this like super elite escape room puzzle kind of place. Again, like, does it sound confusing? Because it is. There are way too many moving pieces in this story for any one of them to really be wrapped up in a satisfying, convincing, or even to be developed in a significant way. Somebody has an earthquake machine that is causing artificial earthquakes. Okay, that's cool, and also it gets disposed of and not really talked about that much after the first third of the book. It becomes totally unimportant. There's the elite escape room place that seems to be doing a ridiculous amount of business and functions basically as a rich people who have too much money are bad rich people because they are trying to buy these crazy experiences that are essentially theft and unethical and a whole bunch of other moral ickiness. And their only motivation for that just seems to be that they're rich and bored. I do feel like Olive gets developed a little bit more as a character throughout this book. We get to see a little bit more of her personality, but she really is, for the most part, just a clear window pane through which to see the story. I see her doing some proactive things, and every once in a while she gets a really cool moment, but I don't feel like I know her at all other than she's quiet and mousy and doesn't say much or participate much. She's mostly listening to other people, and for reasons that just seem to be okay reasons, she is designated the leader of this mission at the end. For what reason, I don't really know. The people I would have called leader or put in charge are not her. And once again in this book, the adults are all morons. The two adults who are supposed to be their mentors go on a coffee run while leaving them in an unscouted, unknown location with who knows who in a place that we know is connected to a series of forgeries and robberies. How big of a moron do you have to be to drop 5 preteens into a dangerous situation where they have no backup, they are not being, like, that was the one thing that I found was the saving grace of the first book, is whenever the Misfits were put into a dangerous situation, they were being monitored by adults. They had means of communication with other grown-ups, and if the situation went seriously sideways, the grown-ups were ready to step in. That is not the case with this story at all. Moreover, adults who should be doing way more and being way more proactive in terms of solving this mystery, we're told there's an undercover agent who's monitoring the situation, who's also gathering information. They do virtually nothing until the very, very end, and we're actually engaged in facilitating the crime at one point. So how that works out, that an adult is going to continue to facilitate a crime when they're like, oh, nope, I've got the evidence, I have this thing here, we can shut this whole thing down right now. No, they just keep letting it happen. Rather than stepping in, rather than bringing that information to the appropriate authorities. And that's the thing, is there don't really seem to be appropriate authorities in this story at all. Yes, there is a police chief involved, and she mostly just seems good to go, okay, Misfits, you kids have got this. This is great. She doesn't really seem to be doing her job very well, which is the truth of most of the adults in this story. The adults are idiots, or they're the bad guys. At no point do I feel like I would trust any one of these grown-ups. There is a very interesting exception to this, and that is that there is one person who is doing their job to the best of their ability, and it turns out they're just being taken advantage of. Their skills are being utilized for nefarious purposes without their knowledge, and I felt like that's a very interesting thing to put forward, is that you have to be careful about who you're working with. You have to have a sense of where the things you put out into the world are going and what they're doing, and you are responsible for that. If you are not responsible for that, you may inevitably be taken advantage of in one way or another, or you may end up accidentally facilitating a crime, and that's not a great place to be. So I did appreciate that. Overall, the story Serpent gives this next Misfits book a mostly meh. Again, the story is fine, I guess, but it's not satisfying. The mystery is okay, I guess, but it's not engaging, and there's just way too many characters to care about anybody properly. And while I love Dan Santat and his illustrations, a lot of them weren't consistent with what was happening in the book. I don't think he had the whole book in order to do illustrations that matched properly. They weren't nearly as engaging as the previous book. So, unfortunately, Story Serpent probably isn't going to continue with this series just because I find it so milquetoast. Will your kids enjoy it? Yeah, probably. Does it give a lot of great messaging? Eh. And it's very possible that they will just tell you, I'm bored, and give up on it. Anyway, that's all I have for today. If you've got a story you want to see the Serpent take on, feel free to put it in the comments below. Until next time, read on, write on, stay sharp.